listener production.
Hey, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Everyone's asking, what the heck is happening to the nightly news? 7 has introduced a comedy segment and nightly horoscopes, while both 7 and 9 have been culling people from newsrooms, and even long-term hosts have been marched out the door.
When you look at the newspaper or magazines or whatever, they will have a cartoon, they will have a horoscope section and so on. So he's sort of pulling things out of other media and putting them into the news bulletin. It's high risk, I think.
The crisis in television news coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Katrina Blowers. It is Thursday, the 18th of July.
Hey Sasha, hi everyone. Well, a key CFMEU leader has signalled a possible fight over Labor's plans to crack down on the union. The federal government yesterday announced it will bring in an independent administrator to clean out the CFMEU after allegations its Victorian branch had been infiltrated by bikies and criminal figures. The National Secretary, Zack Smith, hasn't said yet whether he'll accept the government's plans, but the Secretary of the Queensland CFMEU branch has vowed they will defend each other to the ends of the earth. Those are his words, saying the union isn't going anywhere. Meantime, last night on the ABC 7:30 program, Bill Shorten, who's a former union leader himself, all but confirmed a ban on donations from the CFMEU.
I fully expect the National Executive to make sure that there is no more donations received from the CFMEU until their house is cleaned.
Yeah, so Sasha, this is not an insignificant amount of money they're going to be saying no to. In the lead up to the 2022 election, a quarter of donations to the Labor Party came from the CFMEU.
Yeah, and I think the Labor Party is looking ahead to next year's federal election and recognising that if it's seen to be accepting donations from the CFMEU in the lead up to the vote without this so-called clean out happening within the Victorian branch and a look at what's happening nationally, Labor could get in trouble from the public and from other sides of politics for accepting that money. In terms of whether this independent administrator will be able, to do the job they need to do, Employment Minister Tony Burke has signalled that they will put new laws to federal parliament if they need to overcome the objections from parts of the CFMEU. Labor is trying to take a very hard stance on this issue. And look, it is one of those situations that you might hear about on the sidelines and not quite understand fully what's going on. There is a great deep dive that we did yesterday morning breaking down everything that you need to know. So if you want to go and get up to speed, you can check that out in the feed now. Joe Biden has called on Congress to ban assault rifles, including the model that was used in Donald Trump's attempted assassination.
An AR-15 was used in the shooting of Donald Trump. This was an assault weapon that killed so many others, including children. It's time to outlaw them.
Since the failed attempt, Biden has slowed down campaigning, but seems to be back in full force now. Yesterday, he was speaking at the convention of the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, which is a prominent civil rights group.
Yeah, so gun rights have been a frequently campaigned issue for Biden. This is something he's spoken about, many, many times before. Back in 1994, he was a key player in the successful passing of an assault weapons ban, which actually expired in 2004. And then in Biden's first term in 2022, he signed the most significant gun safety legislation in more than 2 decades, which, among the protections, included enhanced background checks for gun buyers. But since then, Biden hasn't been able to implement an assault weapons ban because of strong opposition from Republicans.
Well, what I tell you next might make that clearer as well. So we found this little tidbit. So the Republican National Convention continues. Trump showed up again yesterday as this surprise guest. He just watched on from the sidelines. He wasn't speaking. That's due to happen tomorrow our time. But there is a side event as part of the RNC, which is like a convention centre where, people can come and buy merch and hear from conservative groups that are linked to the Republican Party. There was a competition running. So this is part of the RNC. It's not a separate event, but it's a separate section of the event where you could win an AR-15, which was the gun that was used in the failed attempted assassination on Donald Trump. So that's kind of paints a picture for you of how the Republicans feel about their guns.
Oh my goodness. I wonder if you can buy the same bandage that Donald Trump, the supersized bandage that I think will be wearing right up until Americans go to the polls. Another interesting side note is the hashtag Where's Melania is really, really picking up steam because we haven't seen her since this assassination attempt, and it is highly unusual for her not to be at the convention. Normally, the spouse of the nominee gives a speech, but Melania hasn't even been listed on the schedule, so we don't know whether she's going to be there or not. Back in 2016, she gave a speech that got a lot of flack because it seemed to borrow from a speech that Michelle Obama made in 2008. So, who knows her reasons for not coming along this time. The other person who hasn't been there is Ivanka. So, we'll be looking to see whether either of those ladies are there in the next day or so. Aussie billionaire Andrew Twiggy Forest Mining Company is going to be slashing 700 jobs. In a statement to the Australian Stock Exchange, Fortescue confirmed the move, saying the restructure was necessary to ensure the company remained lean and agile. It's not clear, Sasha, which jobs are going to be lost.
Fortescue's been focused in recent years on decarbonising its operation and moving into green hydrogen technology. And some analysts say that this is what's impacted the company's bottom line. In a separate statement, though, Twiggy reaffirmed his and Fortescue's commitment to the green transition, saying it wasn't easy, but the risk will be worth the reward.
And Victorians, South Australians, Tasmanians and Western Australians, you might want to block your ears. We're going to talk about the state of origin for a bit.
In its history at Suncorp, this series was supposed to be over after 7 minutes. But what has happened since will go down as an iconic New South Wales series victory.
Yes, that was the call of the final minute as it happened on Triple M. But look, jokes aside, last night's decider between Queensland and New South Wales was one for the ages. The Blues keeping the Maroons tryless to claim the Shield 14 points to 4. Now, this series win for New South Wales ends a 19-year hoodoo at the hallowed grounds of Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane, where the Blues hadn't won a decider since 2005, Katrina. I managed to catch maybe the last 12 minutes of the first half. We get up very early, so I popped my head out after my shower, had a quick look and then went back to bed. It is being hailed as one of the great State of Origin games. The first 39 minutes, no one scored anything. It was completely scoreless, and usually that's a signal of a pretty boring game, but the contest was just so hot from both sides. We did see a bit of biff. One New South Wales player and one Queensland player were both sent off not long before halftime because they got into some push and shove, as they, typically do, I suppose, in these high-stakes games. But also, New South Wales' 19th man, so that's the one that's on the suit on the sidelines, actually got evicted from the stadium because he ran in and started trying to get involved in this fight. So, yeah, it was high emotions, Katrina, at the State of Origin decider last night.
Well, here's the thing. I knew that it wasn't going to be a good result for Queensland because even though I wasn't watching it, I live in Brisbane right near Caxton Street, which if anyone who's been to Brisbane knows that the Caco, which is the pub on Caxton Street, that is like heartland because it's right next to Suncorp Stadium. So it's heartland for Maroon supporters. And while it was pretty rowdy in sort of 8 to 8:30 territory, it got very quiet after that. And I thought, this can't bode well for Queensland.
Commiserations to Queensland fans and apologies to our AFL fan listeners. I promise that's the end of the footy talk for now. Hey, Katrina, thanks so much for joining us for the headlines. Next up, we're going to deep dive into the changes that are currently going on in TV newsland. way we consume news in Australia has changed a lot over the last 2 decades. Watching the news on TV used to be the cornerstone of Aussie households each night. People were wedded to their favourite channel, either 7, 9 or the ABC. They knew the newsreaders' names, who were local celebrities in their own right. But as we know, on-demand news in the form of social media, online publications and podcasts has slowly become the preferred way people access their news. That's left traditional news formats like newspapers, radio and TV scrambling to adapt. There have been mass redundancies at TV newsrooms over the last few weeks, while 7, in a bid to refresh its 6 p.m. bulletin, decided to add daily horoscopes to the mix and run a Friday night comedy segment. So what is happening right now in the television news space, and can it survive? The Briefing's executive producer Dan Mullins has over 25 years' experience in radio and television. In today's deep dive, he sits down with Colin Vickery, a TV and entertainment expert with more than 30 years' experience.
Colin, thanks for joining us on The Briefing. Could you have imagined in your 30-plus year career you'd see horoscopes on the 6 o'clock news?
No, look, absolutely not. I did publicity for a long time for 7 News, and horoscopes was nothing ever in my wildest imagination, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be in most of the news presenters' imagination at Channel 7 either.
So what did you make of Seven's decision to put the 3-minute comedy segment, or satirical segment as they're calling it, in the Friday night bulletin?
Well, look, I think there is actually a precedent for that, Dan, in that if we jump back, you remember John Clark and Brian Dorr. They used to do a satirical segment on a current affair and then the 7:30 report. So that was in a current affairs framework, not in a news framework. And so it sat quite well there. Putting it in a news service, and the way Mark has done his is as an alternative news reader sort of thing. That's the way his format is. To me, that's more problematic because I don't think people would necessarily want to see that in their news service. It sits better in a current affairs. I have to say, look, we'll wait and see how good Mark gets, but the first one that he did, I didn't get a laugh out of. I didn't think it was that good. So, that's the other issue. It has to be good. And the interesting thing is, he took an aim at Joe Biden for his age and cognitive issues. Now, there's a couple of things to say about that. Is Joe Biden top of mind for Channel 7 viewers? We've seen Mark do stuff, I think, on SBS and on socials. And so, he would very much be playing to that sort of audience. 7's a different audience, and 7 has the oldest audience out of all the commercial networks. So if you're going to sort of make fun of someone's age and cognitive issues, I don't know that Channel 7's the place to do it.
What are you hearing from insiders about the reasoning for 7's decision to introduce these changes, all part of the news director Anthony DeSegli's exploration of new ideas and concepts? They've certainly taken a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, look, and he's indicated that the horoscopes and Mark are two of initial things. There's going to be more changes coming, so we'll wait and see what those are. There's been quite a lot of change at 7 across their whole news division. I think there's new bosses at Sunrise, Weekend Sunrise, Spotlight, 7 News in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide. So across the board. And generally speaking, from what I've read of what Anthony said, it's about introducing a new generation of leaders in that, so younger people getting those sort of roles. And it feels to me like what he has said about these two things, it's about bringing new viewers into 7 News. Now, they're not going to be older viewers that he wants to get, I would have thought. They're younger viewers. And that is, I think, behind some of the reason. He's also said, I think, that, when you look at the newspaper or magazines or whatever, they will have a cartoon, they will have a horoscope section and so on. So he's sort of pulling things out of other media and putting them into the news bulletin. It's high risk, I think, because my view is that news success is about consistency, and we've seen a lot of times where there's been some changes made and viewers don't react well to it. The other thing to say is all of this comes at a time when, we've read in the media about 7, but also 9, axing jobs. 150 jobs gone across 7, including Sharon Gadella up in Brisbane, who is a very popular presenter. And so you've got these new hires, if you like, coming into the news at a time when a lot of people are feeling a lot of hurt about losing their job or colleagues losing their jobs. The advertising market's fairly soft, and we know that Nine have probably sucked up even more of that with the Olympics at the moment, so that sort of affects things as well. But I think a lot of it is about sort of a new broom sweeping clean and trying to get a new generation of leaders in those new spots and then trying to attract younger viewers. Now, how easy will it be for Seven to attract younger viewers? I think, younger people get their news in completely different ways and probably don't even think about Channel 7 or Channel 9 and even Channel 10. It's more about TikTok and social media and so on.
Yeah, Sharon Godella said in a statement, I'm also not one to have my evening news served up with humour and horoscopes either, so to be honest, it's time to go. She was summing up that her generation is moving on.
Exactly. And look, let's, having watched the astrology segment, let's just say that it isn't very long. It's 20 seconds, and it's just before the weather, and the news presenters aren't presenting it. It just comes up as a couple of visuals for people to take in. So, but I would have thought that a lot of the presenters at Channel 7 in news and a lot of the staff would sort of think what Sharon says, that it feels wrong for that to be part of it. And it feels wrong for it to be the initial thing. I think, if Seven had have introduced a number of different changes and then down the track horoscopes came in, then people might have a different attitude. But when it's really the first thing to come out of the gate, I think it isn't very big in the bulletin, but it's sort of symbolically big. It sort of goes, this is where we're heading. This is the direction we're heading. And I think that sends the wrong signal.
Yeah, and I think also then when you said the other changes, if they don't take too kindly to this particular change, you've lost them.
That's right. And I mean, we're yet to really see what Sharon going from Brisbane does for Seven up there. That's the other part of it. People really like their news presenters. We have to say, look, Nine out down in Melbourne made a change at the end of last year and have brought in Alicia Loxley and Tom Steinford and replaced Peter Hitchener. And I'm sure that was after years of research, and I'm sure there was a lot of nervousness there about that because, there could have been a backlash and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
The other part to all of this, I should say, is about what's happening between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because that's been the other big change this year, has been that Nine decided to end Millionaire Hot Seat between 5 and 6 and put in the tipping point. And that has gone exceptionally well for Nine. And so for some years, Seven News were getting a boost from how well the Chase Australia was doing compared to Millionaire Hot Seat. But now that's evened up completely. They're doing pretty much the same figures every night. And so is the answer to a news service that may be under a bit of pressure to change things in the actual news service? Well, I think that we've seen that it's about the lead-in just as much. So part of it can be just sort of weathering the storm, if you like. I'm sure no one was quite sure how well Tipping Point would do. It could have just died, but it's done really well. Todd Woodbridge is a good host. But is it in there for the long haul? Is it something that will do well for a year and then drop off? So sometimes you've sort of got to just, weather the storm and just ride it through and see what happens. But I do feel that what's happening is at Seven, there's this philosophy of let's get some younger viewers, let's put some younger people into important roles in news and current affairs. I don't know about your history. My history is that whenever networks really go out of their way to get younger viewers, it never really ends well.
It'll be interesting to see how long Seven's radical news changes last, and if they do last, how long it takes the other networks to follow suit, I suppose.
The thing is, if it doesn't work for Seven, the people will go to Nine. That's the thing. They're not gonna switch off and do something else. There's obviously a big group of people, 2 to 3 million people at that time of night want to watch news, and if they start to not like what they see on Channel 7, they will go to Channel 9.
That was our EP, Dan Mullins, talking with TV and entertainment expert Colin Vickery. And that is all for this episode of The Briefing. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. We're also on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. And we'll be back in your feed with another ep this afternoon from 3. I'm Sasha Barbagat. We'll see you then.
Listener.